The wind came off the ridge like breath held too long. Staff Sergeant Riley Shaw stepped off the ramp into air that smelled of metal and dust, the kind that scraped the inside of your nostrils and stuck to your teeth. Around her, the rest of the platoon fanned out in staggered motion, boots thudding dull against the rock. The CH-47s lifted behind them in tandem, rotor wash peeling loose sand from the ground and curling it into slow, swirling spirals. As the sound faded into the distance, the mountain didn't answer back. It simply stood there, jagged and watchful, cloaked in a light too red to feel real. Riley adjusted the strap of her pack, double-checked the sling of her rifle, and pressed the record button on the body cam strapped tight to her chest rig. The click was soft, mechanical, and absolute. No one had ordered footage. No one even asked. She did it out of habit, out of instinct. The sensor light blinked once and went steady green. They were supposed to insert "sweep the pass" and hold until relieved. Intelligence reports had gone dark 2 days prior. Command called it a blind zone. No confirmed enemy presence. Aerial recon showed nothing but old erosion lines and burned-out switchbacks. On paper, it was a dormant route. On the ground, Riley saw no birds, no wind ripple in the grass, not even the usual buzz of insects under the rocks, just the kind of silence that made even seasoned boots forget how to breathe right. Captain Miles raised a fist and pointed toward the far ridge. Fireteam Alpha peeled off first, moving along the southern crest. Riley fell in with Bravo, halfway up a fractured incline that funneled into a narrow corridor of shale and broken brush. Each step gave a soft crunch. Her boots flexed over uneven stone, weight distributed evenly, knees slightly bent. She said nothing. The others filled the air with clipped call-outs and bearing checks. Morales swore under his breath about the altitude. Givens, younger, cracked a joke that didn't land. Riley kept her mouth shut and her eyes moving. The red sun dropped behind the peaks, casting long black silhouettes across the ground. For a moment, it looked like shadows were walking among them. Just figures on the rocks. Nothing moved. No echoes came back. But Riley's eyes lingered on one shape a second longer than the others. Then it was gone. She dropped to a knee behind a low outcrop, scanned her sector, and tapped her glove against her thigh twice. Nothing wrong on the surface, but nothing right either. She glanced once toward the sky, where the last rotor flash had faded completely. No sound, no light, no fallback. A small gust stirred the dust along the trail ahead. It rose in a slow curl, then settled just as quickly. Riley's gaze held there, not because of what she saw, but because of what she didn't. She checked the green light on her body cam again and moved forward. The first shot didn't sound like a gunshot. It came as a sharp crack off the far ridge, more like a branch snapping under pressure, except there were no trees here. Riley had just swept her scope across the eastern crest when the second shot came. Sharper. Closer. Then the radio chirped just once and cut off mid-transmission. "We're not," was all it said. Then silence. Then the flares. Red light erupted overhead, fired in threes from 3 different ridgelines. It painted the rocks in blood and turned the shadows alive. Riley dropped flat as the crack of a sniper round punched air just inches above her head. Another Marine Kessler had just raised his rifle when he staggered back, fell hard, and didn't move again. The round had taken him just under the chin. Riley didn't have time to reach for him. Gunfire opened from 3 elevations, controlled bursts, staggered, suppressive, calculated, not panic fire. It came in clean intervals, covering movement. Whoever was up there knew spacing, recoil timing, lane control. They weren't insurgents, not the usual kind. Riley rolled behind the nearest rock slab and shouted for visual bearings, but her voice drowned under overlapping fire. She risked a quick peek 3 flashes at 2 o'clock high, then a 4th below, and left. Enfilade setup, textbook trap, and they had walked right into the V. An RPG launched from the north slope. The hiss was sudden and sharp, followed by a concussive boom as it struck the rocks behind Fireteam Alpha's position. Dust cascaded down like broken ash. Someone screamed, short and high. Another radio call spiked and clipped Bravo's hit. Bravo! Before static swallowed it. Riley's boots slipped as she shifted position, sliding along shale. Her rifle slammed against the stone and she caught it mid-bounce. She could feel the grit biting into her elbows. The world narrowed to angles and breath and recoil. To her left, Givens fired uphill in short bursts. The echo slapped against the rocks and rolled back in confusion. For every muzzle flash they caught, another came from somewhere unseen. She raised her head just enough to catch movement in her scope, two figures bounding between cover on the far crest, dark shapes against the flare glow. One of them paused. A laser swept across the slope in a tight arc and caught Morales square in the shoulder. He dropped flat, gasping, crawling toward cover with one hand dragging limp. Riley moved low, cross-body, knees and palms grinding through stone. Brass casings clattered around her like hail. Her comms were a snarl of broken syllables and static. She keyed her mic, trying to raise anyone. Nothing came back but fragments, and that same glitched phrase repeating in a loop. We're not. She found partial cover behind a narrow slab, heart hammering but controlled. The air smelled of heat and pulverized rock. Her fingers adjusted the optic reflexively. No thought. Just repetition. The body moves the way it's trained. She swept left, then right. Smoke rolled in thin sheets from the higher ridges. She caught a figure shifting just beyond the flare perimeter too fast, too clean to be untrained. One step, then vanished. She tapped her helmet twice. Her HUD still flickered, battery low. Her body cam light blinked green once, then dimmed behind the dust film. She didn't wipe it off. No time. To her left, Captain Miles crawled into partial view, one arm bleeding freely through his sleeve. He barked out orders between clenched teeth, pointing toward fallback markers. Only half of it made sense through the noise. Another RPG streaked overhead. This one missed but shattered the rock cover behind them, showering gravel and powdered debris. Riley pulled Morales into her shadow, shoved a pressure wrap into his hand, and turned her focus uphill. She fired. Twice. Missed the first. The second round caught something. A shape stumbled. Not downed, but marked. She moved again. The flares were dying now. Shadows deepened. Lasers blinked out. But fire still came. Another voice on the comms, barely audible, muttered. They were already here. No ID. No reply. She keyed her mic once more. Static. Then that broken voice again. Stuttering. We're... The mountain swallowed it all. Riley moved first. Down the slope toward the dry stream bed, boots grinding loose shale underfoot as dust and smoke wrapped the air in gritty sheets. The gunfire behind them came in waves now. Not steady, but cruel, like it knew when to chase and when to wait. She didn't look back. She just kept moving. Captain Miles shouted something about fire support, voice cracking through his throat mic. Grid coordinate, he began. But the sentence didn't finish. The uplink stayed dark. No signal. No reply. The comms hissed and spat, then fell into dead silence again. Ahead, the dry wash opened in a narrow arc, half choked with rubble from a recent slide. Riley slid behind a boulder and pulled out a folded sleeve of laminated notes from her vest. The grid sketch she had drawn 2 nights before was wrinkled and dirt-stained, but still legible. One red dot, hand-drawn in grease pencil, marked a low ravine no one else had bothered to notice. She crumpled it back into her pocket and signaled the others forward. Givens stumbled past her, breath high and fast, rifle clutched too tight. His voice cracked. Where the hell is Bravo 3? No one answered. Morales limped after him, face gray, one hand pressed to his thigh. Riley grabbed his webbing and yanked him back behind cover as another burst scattered rocks off the ridge. Kessler was right behind me. Someone said, but it was just noise now. They weren't forming up. They were unraveling, The fire team was down to 7, maybe less, depending on what shadows had turned silent. No one knew who was still up the slope. Miles was barely keeping pace, hand pressed tight against his ribs, blood soaking into his side plate. He looked at her, just once, and didn't say a word. He followed. They moved through the cut in 2 files, eyes up, weapons raised, steps uneven. The dust caught in Riley's throat and made her blink more than she wanted. She counted each man as they passed a bend in the wash. When they reached the deeper section, she dropped to a crouch, scanned the walls above them, and waited. Behind her, something clattered hard against stone. A helmet, half crushed, rolled to a stop against a flat slab. It was standard issue. No markings. No one claimed it. Up ahead, the sun finally dipped below the far ridge. The last light went cold, casting the stream bed in a dark blue that made every angle feel like it could be an ambush. Riley took a shallow breath. The maps were all wrong. The plan was dead. But she remembered this route from satellite overlays no one else had reviewed. Givens called out again, louder this time. "What grid is this? Where the hell are we?" Riley didn't answer. She just kept moving, one step at a time, into terrain that was no longer familiar to anyone but her. The defile was narrow and steep, barely wider than the span of 2 shoulders. Loose rock cluttered the floor, and the walls climbed high and dark on both sides, funneling the cold air down like a breath held too long. Riley moved with her knees slightly bent, footsteps deliberate, rifle canted low but ready. Her fingers twitched with leftover adrenaline, but her face stayed flat. They had maybe 5 raiders still upright. Givens sat with his back against a boulder, his chest heaving through a cracked plate. Morales leaned over him, eyes red from dust and smoke. Captain Miles crouched near the bend in the wall, blood drying thick across the torn flap of his uniform. He held a smoke grenade in one hand, thumb resting on the pin, not moving. Claymores came out of packs without a word. Each one was set low, angled toward the only opening behind them. No one asked how many were left. No one asked who would trigger them. The clicks of arming switches sounded louder than they should in the close space. Riley pulled out her tablet, shielding the screen from the open sky. Her gloved fingers moved quickly, calling up thermal overlays. The pattern was familiar. Too familiar. She watched the same ridge pulses repeat in near-identical intervals, and then repeat again. Her brow creased. She zoomed in. A red dot flickered, shifted half an inch, and then snapped back to its original location. The feed wasn't live. It hadn't been live. They had been walking blind. She turned the brightness down, clicked her tongue once against her teeth, and closed the screen. Miles looked over, meeting her eyes. He said nothing. He just let the silence sit. From the corner of the defile, a soft radio tone crackled. A downed handset still looped the same half-second clip. The voice came fractured and distant, caught in its last breath. "We're not then static. Then again, we're not." "Looped us," Givens said, voice hoarse. "They looped our eyes." No one corrected him. Morales set another claymore behind a low fold in the rock, hands shaking. He paused halfway through securing the line and said it out loud. Quiet, but sure. They knew we'd be here. Still no one argued. The rocks had more weight than the briefing room ever did. Riley adjusted her optic, checked the chamber, and exhaled through her nose. The walls around them pressed close. No wind. No sound from outside the narrow sky above. Just waiting. Just breath. She reached for her body cam and tapped it once, watching the green light pulse faintly behind a layer of dirt. It blinked again. Weaker. No orders came. No relief. No guidance. Just the feel of stone against her gloves and the low, mechanical hum of gear wound too tight. Riley didn't say what she had seen. She just kept the screen off and the camera on. The rocks cooled fast after dark. Riley crouched near the far bend of the defile, her back pressed against the cold wall, knees tucked close to keep warmth from leaking. The others were scattered in the shadows. Givens fiddled with his bootstrap just to keep his hands busy. Morales lay flat under a poncho liner, breathing thin through clenched teeth. Captain Miles hadn't spoken in over an hour. The silence didn't feel restful. It was the kind that hovered just behind your neck. Riley tapped her tablet awake and brought up the body cam footage. The interface lit her face in a blue cast, flickering as it loaded. Dust blurred the lens in the early frames, ash floating in soft arcs through flare light. She dragged the timestamp back to just before the ambush. No sound yet, just motion, shapes moving over stone, a shadow leaning left against a slope, pausing. She froze the frame and leaned in. The figure wasn't militia. The gear was too clean, the posture too tight. The rifle wasn't a hand-me-down Kalashnikov. It was a modern bullpup platform, short-barreled and matte black, stock raised flush with a clean shoulder profile. The helmet had a mounted module thermal, most likely. The armor plates were shaped and tiered. Foreign issue, not black market. Riley zoomed tighter. There, near the chest seam, partly turned away from the cam, a patch. The colors were muted, but the shape wasn't tribal. It wasn't regional. The angle cut hard through the center, with 3 horizontal slashes faint, almost faded, but intentional. Canton. It didn't belong to any known faction in country. She blinked once, then pulled open a side folder and accessed an offline SIGINT cache. Old pattern recognition briefs, partner forces, regional alliances, flagged uniforms. She scrolled fast but carefully, fingertips tight on the screen, page after page. Then she stopped. There it was. Not an exact match, but close. A paramilitary contractor group registered under a neutral flag, not known to be active in this region, not supposed to be here at all. Across the defile, Givens spoke softly to no one in particular. They ever tell you what this op was actually for? His voice cracked at the edges, stretched too thin from smoke and thirst. No one answered. He went quiet again. Riley tapped her grease pencil against the screen and circled the timestamp 21 minutes before first contact. She stared at the still frame. The patch sat clearly on the chest of a man with a suppressed weapon, standing uphill in position before the first Marine had even raised a radio. The camera flicked backward as she scrapped through more frames. Dust blew past the lens. Another shadow. Another figure. No visible insignia this time. But the stance shoulder turned just slightly toward the rock wall. Rifle ready matched the previous one. These weren't shepherds turned fighters. They were trained. She played the clip twice more, scrubbing forward and back, checking the intervals between motion. They were holding the high ground long before anyone noticed. Waiting. Watching. She leaned back against the stone, pulled her scarf tighter, and set the tablet on her knee. Her body cam was still rolling, slow green pulse under grit. She didn't speak, didn't react, just adjusted her gloves and stared into the dark where the trail disappeared behind the rocks. They hadn't just walked into a trap, they had walked into a show already set up to begin. And no one else had noticed, not yet. The glow from the enemy tablet cut across the dark like a blade. Private Hammond hunched over it, knees drawn up, fingers moving with nervous precision. He had found it inside the wreckage of a pack wedged beneath one of the fallen shooters. Its screen spider-cracked, but still functional. Now it sat propped against a flat stone, looping quietly under his breath as he worked through the bootloader. The others lingered nearby in the silence, wounded, bleeding, exhausted, but watching. The file unlocked with a faint click. A folder labeled Engagement Record opened automatically. Inside were several preloaded video segments. Hammond hesitated, then tapped one. The playback began without sound. It was drone footage, stabilized and framed too clean. The opening angle swept across the pass from elevation, capturing the platoon's insertion. The camera tilted as the CH-47s pulled away. Riley felt her jaw tighten. The angle wasn't theirs. This wasn't U.S. drone footage. The next clip opened from ground-level handheld, fast, jittery someone filming from the ridge as the raiders moved through the kill zone. Names and unit tags appeared over their heads, digitally overlaid in real time. Red targets blinked beside the tags, syncing with muzzle flashes. Riley watched the moment Morales dropped to one knee. The footage zoomed. It held on his face, then cut away. Another file began. Riley leaned in. It was her. Not just her silhouette, her face. Angled into the sun, helmet shadow across her brow, body cam strapped tight. She was crouched near the slab before the first shot had ever been fired. The timestamp blinked across the corner 21 minutes before initial contact. She didn't speak. She just stared at herself, frozen in frame, caught mid-glance. A targeting reticle bloomed in red just over her chest. Then the scene cut again. Hammond sat back, shoulders slowly curling. "This isn't recon," he whispered. "They made this." Captain Miles stirred against the wall, voice thin through grit-dried lips. This was never ours to win. The smoke grenade still sat in his hand, pin untouched. Another file launched on its own. A polished montage played in sequence clean title cards in a foreign script. Dramatic music overlays, stills pulled directly from the firefight, edited in rhythm. The last transmission phrase looped under it all, distorted, reshaped into rhythm. Riley's voice echoed through a filter. Contact, left, contact, left, contact. Then silence. The video ended on a black screen, just a logo, then nothing. No one moved. No one spoke. Riley closed the tablet gently, her fingers resting a moment longer than needed. She didn't curse. She didn't speak. She just sat there, surrounded by the dying firelight, lit by the enemy's lens. They hadn't just been targeted. They had been edited. The slope lit up before the sound reached them. A white-hot streak curved downward from the ridge and smashed into the ledge above with a shuddering boom that cracked stone and blew grit in all directions. Riley ducked behind a boulder, shoulder pressed hard into the rock, jaw clenched as shards of broken shale peppered the air. Heat rolled through the dust like breath from a furnace. Contact high right flank Morales shouted from behind the debris wall they'd half-assembled before dusk. His voice cracked, sharp with effort, but not panic. Riley didn't reply. She popped up just long enough to fire 3 rounds, controlled and clean, into the moving haze at the crest. A red laser cut the smoke near her cheek, and she dropped low again. The bolt of light slid across the rock face and vanished. A second RPG launched, this one striking wide and low, throwing a spray of loose earth that rattled across her helmet. The whole slope groaned under the impact. Riley rolled over her elbow and crawled toward Givens, who was reloading with trembling hands behind a wedge of stone. "We've got 2 on the left ridge," he said between breaths. "At least 2 more cycling the right." He slammed a fresh mag into his rifle and glanced at her, eyes raw and blinking. "We don't have time." Riley pulled her sidearm, sighted, and squeezed off 3 shots toward a muzzle flash slicing through the dark. She counted each recoil. 1, 2, 3, 4. Click. She didn't hesitate. She holstered the empty pistol and took Givens' backup rifle off his back. She checked the chamber, adjusted the sling, and nodded. She was already moving again. Another raider, Calloway, broke cover to flank the right side. His foot caught on exposed cable. He fell hard, tried to rise, and never made it. Gunfire erupted from above and drove him flat. He didn't move again. "Claymore's rigged," Morales shouted, dragging the wire taut along the base of the slope. Riley knelt beside him, eyes locked on the jagged silhouette cresting the upper ledge. Just a shape at first, then a rifle glint, then 3 short bursts. She pressed her shoulder to Morales and fired uphill, correcting half a degree with each pull. Dust rose in thin curtains. The silhouette shifted, then dropped. The green light on her body cam blinked steadily through the haze. She adjusted the strap on her vest to tighten the angle, positioning it forward. No one would see this now, but someone might see it later. Givens moved to her left, laying suppressive fire uphill with precise rhythm. Morales pulled the claymore wire back 1 more inch and nodded. Riley crouched beside the trigger plate, waited for the angle to clear, then tapped it with her glove. The explosion slammed upward with a throat-deep thump, spraying rock and shrapnel into the face of the ridge. Silence followed for a breath. 2 breaths. Then scattered gunfire returned, looser now, more erratic. "They're testing for position," Givens muttered. "Still coming." Riley didn't answer. She swept the ridge again, tracked one movement to the edge of the rise, and fired once. The body fell without sound. The smoke was thick now, the kind that tasted like copper and carbon. It drifted across the rocks and blurred the lines between stone and shadow. Riley's breathing stayed measured. Her reloads were smooth. No wasted motion. This wasn't panic, this was procedure. The mountain roared again, and she stayed on the trigger. The light had gone soft, the kind that didn't cast shadows but folded everything into the same fading gray. The slope above was silent now, wind brushing across broken rock and blood-dark dust. Riley knelt beside the collapsed relay unit, its casing cracked. The antenna bent just enough to matter. She adjusted it with 2 fingers, twisted the dial twice, and waited. The tablet's screen glowed weak in the dying light. A status bar flickered to life green, jittery, hesitant. One file began to upload. Riley didn't breathe as the number ticked upward. 2%, 7, 12, 14. Then it froze. A text alert pulsed across the top of the screen. Negative QRF, hold position, outside theater support. The words sat there, unmoving, without sound. Riley stared at them without blinking. Behind her, Givens sat on the ground, legs outstretched, weapon across his lap. Morales crouched a few feet away, bandaging his own forearm with strips of a shredded sleeve. Neither of them spoke. Captain Miles shifted, just barely, against the base of the rock where they'd braced him. His breath rattled thin in his throat. Riley moved to him without hurry, knelt at his side, one hand pressing against his chest to steady his movement. His eyes opened halfway. His voice was paper dry. "Make it matter," he whispered. Riley nodded once. She didn't speak. Miles's eyes closed again, his lips tightening, then loosening, like something unfinished had already passed through him. He didn't move after that. She pulled the dog tag from beneath his plate carrier, thumb brushing the dried edge of blood that had crusted around the chain. The tag was still warm. She closed her fist around it and sat back on her heels, letting her head tilt to one side as the breeze moved past her face. The relay unit crackled. The screen dimmed. The file remained stuck at 14%. The ridge above was quiet. No movement. No sound of engines. No echo of rotor blades. Just the hum of the relay's dying battery and the faint rasp of someone breathing behind her. Riley didn't look up. She didn't shut the screen off. She just let it stay on, the green light pulsing in time with nothing at all. The goat trail was more suggestion than path, a fading line of worn stone clinging to the cliff's edge with no promise of stability. Riley stepped first, body angled toward the wall, one boot sliding until it found enough purchase to hold. The drop below vanished into blue haze, air thinning by the foot. She tapped a grease pencil against the rock face, left a faint red mark, then moved on. Behind her, Givens followed, breathing sharp and shallow. Morales came last, dragging his leg just slightly, his weight uneven. The sky was shifting into that final hue between day and night when depth flattens and shadows pretend to be cover. Each step was deliberate. Riley kept her shoulders square, rifle held tight, barrel down, pack high on her back. The GPS unit clipped to her vest, beeped faintly. Screen cracked, the readout stuttering. She didn't look at it. Her eyes were on the next step, the rock beneath it, and the wind curling around her neck like a warning. They moved single file, the cliff wall pressing cold against their left sides. Nothing above them but jagged slope, nothing below but air and stone. The trail narrowed to a shoulder's width, then tightened more. Riley crouched, moved sideways, and stretched her fingers out along the rock face until she cleared the bend. She marked again another red dash. A sound echoed behind them, light but wrong. Givens froze. Riley raised one hand without turning. Fingers splayed. They waited. Nothing followed. Just the wind again, pushing dust off the high ridge and into their mouths. Then, from the far hilltop across the valley, a flare arced into the sky. It rose clean, silent, perfect, then bloomed bright white before fading into orange. Riley watched it from beneath her helmet brim, expression unchanged. She knew what it meant. Extraction. Somewhere close. Not for them. She didn't speak. She just held her gaze a moment longer than necessary. Then she turned and kept moving. Her body ached, bruises blooming along her sides, joints stiff from cold and recoil. Her boots were dust-worn, laces frayed. The barrel of her rifle had scraped clean lines through half the trail. Still, she moved with purpose. Not speed, not desperation, just intention. Behind her, the two men followed without a word. Givens stepped where she stepped. Morales breathed through his teeth, one hand pressed against his side, but never stopped. They were outside the mission now, off the plan, uncounted. Riley reached a small shelf in the rock, crouched, and held still. She checked the slope above, then glanced down the narrow passage ahead. No figures, no movement, no flare meant for them. The path curved again. She drew the pencil one last time and marked the stone. Then she stood and walked on. The apartment was dim except for the soft light of a desk lamp and the pale blue wash of a laptop screen. Outside, traffic moved in slow rhythm, distant and muted. Inside, the journalist sat still, elbows on the table, hands wrapped around a plain envelope now lying open beside her notes. No return address, no markings, just a small black drive tucked inside like an afterthought. She had plugged it in without expectation. Now, the screen flickered as the video played. There was no menu, no splash screen, just a date buried in metadata and a file labeled with nothing but numbers. The footage opened mid-motion, a chest-mounted view, wind tearing across a high ridge, gunfire somewhere just out of frame, radio chatter distorted by dust and range. Riley's breathing loud in the mic, steady even when everything else wasn't. The camera swept side to side as she moved, shale breaking under boots, helmet shadow shifting with every glance. A silhouette appeared through the smoke, then vanished. Another flare went up. Voices echoed and broke apart. The timestamp kept blinking in the corner, never skipping, never pausing. The journalist leaned closer, hand resting on the corner of the keyboard. The footage shifted again. Now Riley crouched behind rock. Blood dried across her temple, face streaked and silent. Her hands worked fast, reloading, marking stone, adjusting optics, gunfire in the background. No commentary, no explanation. Just the raw act of someone who knew what she was doing and expected no one to see it. Then the final clip. Riley turned the camera inward. Just her face. Calm. Bruised. The blood had dried but not been wiped away. Her eyes didn't blink. She didn't speak. She simply looked into the lens for a moment longer than necessary. Then the screen went black. The journalist didn't move right away. Her pen lay motionless beside a half-written line. On the screen, the playback bar reset. Below it, a single audio tag embedded at the file's end. The speaker's voice faint, frayed. This was never ours to win. The words lingered, then faded into silence. Outside, headlights passed across the window, casting thin white lines across the floor. Inside, the screen stayed dark. The drive clicked once as the laptop powered down. The journalist reached forward, gently removed it, and set it beside the pen. She hadn't written Riley's name, but she would.